Well, this morning, you're going to see a lot on the screens of moving forward. Not really notes this morning, but you can take some notes if you'd like to on the back of the announcement sheet in there. But, this morning, we're talking about movement and moving forward. And it's not always a fun thing sometimes to move forward. In the last couple of weeks, Karen and I, and you guys all know with Seth, he's 21 and all, but so we've never actually experienced the graduation thing with one of our kids, all right, who is actually graduating, right? And so we got to spend the last several months doing the whole senior thing, all the stuff that goes along with seniors, and all the extra, ceremonies and all the extra parties and all the extra everything, then actual graduation. And then this last week, actually, because Abby is spending the summer in Colorado Springs interning at a church, we actually dropped her off and left her this last week. So for the first time, we've actually had to move forward, with one of our kids growing up, kind of a thing. Which, for those of you that have had that happen, it's not always an easy thing. Sometimes it's easier on some than others, right? Sometimes it's easier to say, hey, get out, we're good, grow up. And then others, it's not as easy to move forward on. And so, we've had to do some moving forward. It's part of life. Moving forward is part of life. Movement is part of life. And it's something that's needed in almost every area of our lives. Let's face it. If you stop moving, if you personally were to stop moving, all right, there are certain things that would happen. First of all, you might get out of shape a little bit, all right? Yeah. Sometimes, if it's even more serious, if you're laid up in bed or something, you can't move, your body can't move, your body starts to shut down, right? Parts of your body stops working because we're not made to be still. Sores will develop. Things will happen because it's not normal. Right? If the car, for instance, sits still for too long, parts of the car will start breaking. They'll start eroding away. They'll stop working. It's not made to sit still. Water. If water is sitting still in a pond or something, what happens to that water? It becomes what? Stagnant. Right? It's not made to sit still. It's made to move. Keeps things healthy. And if we become unmoving in our spiritual lives, those same kind of things will happen to us. You'll become stagnant, right? You'll become sick. You will wear out. You'll break down. We're not made to sit still and do nothing spiritually. That's not what we're supposed to be. When I'm talking about being unmoving, I'm not talking about the times where God says, hey, be still. Because sometimes we're moving too much. And God says, slow down a little bit. Don't stop. Slow down a little bit. Take some time to listen to my voice, to hear me, to recuperate. There are times that we need to be still and do those things, but when we become unmoving, we become still, we become stagnant, that is not what we're looking for. That's not what I'm talking about. And most of you in here may be thinking, well, and that's not me. Here I am. I'm sitting in church this morning on a Sunday morning. I've sang some worship songs. I shook some hands and hugged some people. Thank goodness I'm not sitting still. I'm not unmoving. But yet I think sometimes Satan uses that to kind of trip us up. Because a lot of us, that's what we do. We come to church. We sit in our chair. We sing a few songs. We say hi to the right people. We walk out those doors, and nothing in our life ever changes. Spiritually, we become unmoving. We're just going through the routine. And we talk about that a lot here at Calvary. Is we don't want you to come in here, sit, enjoy the service, and leave the same that you came in. That's not what our goal is. If you're not leaving here different, if you're not leaving here being challenged to do something different, to move forward, then we're not doing our job, or you're not coming in with the right heart. And so there's more to it. We have to be moving. And so this morning we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at movement and kind of what that should mean in our spiritual lives. And we're going to look through several passages of Scripture throughout the morning. And so there's Bibles around you, but they'll also be on the screen. But the first thing I'll look at is a story, a little bit of Isaac. And if you guys know anything about the story of Isaac, Jacob, and Esau, and all the things that went on with Isaac, for him to earn or to get his birthright or his brother's birthright, there's a whole story there. But later on in life, when we see Isaac actually maturing, actually being a leader, doing the things that God wanted him to do, we see some things about Isaac. In Genesis chapter 26, I'm going to read this out of the King James Version. In Genesis 26, verse 12 and 13, this is what it says. It says, and it's talking about Isaac now. He's moved on. He's got past all his childish mistakes that he's made. And it says, then Isaac, he showed in that land, and he received in the same year, after he sowed his crops, we understand that, right? And he received in the same year 100-fold. All right, so 100-fold more than he planted. He had a huge harvest. The Lord blessed him. All right, so he did this. He had a huge harvest. The Lord blessed him. But that wasn't enough for Isaac. Because then it says, after that happened, and the man waxed great. He became a great man, and then he went forward. And he grew until he became very great. Now I want you to remember this verse. We're going to refer back to it. We may not come back up, but we're going to refer back to it. In fact, just leave that up, Rachel, for a few minutes, okay? If we look closely at this scripture, we're going to notice a few things. First of all, Isaac became great because of God's blessing. Okay, he didn't do it on his own. God blessed him, and because of his blessing, he became great. And that was a great thing. And we all would love to be in that place, right? I think everyone in this room would like to be able to be living such a life that we're receiving blessings from God in ways that we can't even imagine. That we're receiving great things in our lives because of our faithfulness to God. We'd all like to be in that place where our faithfulness to God is producing blessings in our lives. And because of those blessings, we're able to bless others. I mean, we all like to be there. It's a great spot to be in, being blessed by God. But that's not just where it stopped. Okay, he was blessed by God, yes. He became great because of that. But then it says after all that happened, he didn't just sit back and say, man, this is nice. I'm going to sit back and enjoy what God is doing in my life. No, it says he then went forward. Okay, and after he went forward, what happened? He went from being great to becoming very great. It changed. Isaac apparently was not satisfied with just the initial blessing that already made him great. No, he wanted more. See, I think a lot of us, we become satisfied in our lives. We become comfortable right where we are. And I know we all like to be comfortable, right? I mean, we wear comfortable clothes. We like to sit in comfortable seats. So the last several weeks, with Abby's graduation, we had family in. My mom and dad ran, and so we gave up our bedroom. And guys, I'm just telling you right now, I love my bed. All right, it's a great bed. I can sleep well in my bed. It's just the right firmness. I'm not really good on soft and super hard. It's just right. I got the pillows the way I like them. It's a king-size bed, so Karen doesn't get in my way while I'm sleeping, or anything. I mean, I like my bed. I sleep well. I like sleep. How many of you guys like sleep in here? Anybody? Okay. I like sleep, okay? It's a good thing to go to sleep. I enjoy it. And when I was a kid, I could sleep anywhere, right? I could lay down on this floor and I could sleep fine. I wouldn't be able to get up off the floor now if I slept on this floor, right? I mean, there's just things that change. So I love my bed. Well, in the last several weeks, I've not slept in my bed, all right? My parents were here, so they slept on my bed, which was great. They're old. They needed that. All right, that's fine. So I slept on our couch. Not near as comfortable as my bed. Did I sleep well? Not as well as I would have liked, okay? So then I leave the same day my parents leave, so I don't get to go back to sleep in my bed, even for a night. No, then I go on this trip. So I'm sleeping in motel room beds, right? And then I'm sleeping at a variety of places. I slept on an air mattress, when I was staying, my brother lives up there, so we spend a couple of days in Delaware, and I use my brother's house as kind of home base on this trip. Well, I slept in my nephew Bryce's bed. All right, he's 7. All right, so the bed is a little shorter than I'm used to. It's and I loved the Spider-Man sheets and everything. That was okay. All right, that didn't affect my sleeping. I loved the Spider-Man. the Superman and the Batman sitting there staring at me all night. That's okay. I'm okay with all that stuff. But his bed is soft. Okay, I'm talking, and maybe he's light and it doesn't affect him. But when I get in that bed, it's like I'm going right to the floor. It's so soft, And so I got up every morning, and I'm stiff, and I'm hurting. I was not comfortable. Let me just tell you. And then we got home late Friday night. I had a few hours to sleep in my bed, which was okay, but wasn't great. Last night was the first night I've slept in my bed in weeks, and I did not want to get up this morning. I slept hard. I was comfortable, right? We like to be comfortable, okay? All of us do. But yet sometimes, spiritually speaking, we get so comfortable that we stop moving because I'm comfortable. Why would I want to move out of this space of comfort and take a chance of being uncomfortable or take a chance of not enjoying it as much as I'm enjoying it? And we get satisfied. So much so that we don't even look to do more. We don't even look to move forward. Because things are so good, why would I want to change them? But see, Isaac was in that place. He could have got to that place. Things were really, really good in Isaac's life. He was being blessed by God 100-fold more than he was even investing. It was great stuff, great times. But he couldn't just sit back and be okay with being okay. He needed to move forward and do more. He went forward. And when he went forward, he grew until he became very great. Now notice, Isaac began to grow when? Okay, after he started moving. See, not when he just came to church, sat, sang the songs and went home, and never one time tried to do anything different. No. Not just when he nodded his head and said, yeah, that's a pretty good point there, preacher, and then that was it. No, he had to do more. He had to move forward. And he went from blessing to greatness, and then he went from beyond greatness to becoming very great because he continued to move forward. Here's the deal. I think the message here, it can be quite simple for all of us in here. If we have a desire to become great, we got to move forward. Every athlete knows if they want to become a great athlete, they got to work harder. They got to push more. They got to keep moving forward. Doing the same old thing like everybody else is doing is not going to make them great. We go to the New Testament in Philippians, and here we see Paul. Okay, and the Apostle Paul understood this principle because he's writing to the church of Philippi, and we've read this passage before, but he's writing to these guys, and he's already attained some great things, Paul has, okay? He's done some amazing things for God. He's affected a lot of people. His ministry is growing, and it's doing great, all right? But he says in verse 13 of Philippians chapter 3, we go to Philippians 3, verse 13, and this is what he says. He says, brothers and sisters, he says, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, yet to have attained everything I want to attain, okay? He said, but this one thing I do. I'm going to forget what is behind, and he's not saying I'm going to forget the bad things behind. He says, I'm going to forget all the great things that I've done, forget all the good, forget all the amazing things, and instead of remembering those and living with the past, he says, no, I'm going to forget those, and I am going to strain towards what is ahead. I press on, I move on towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. He said, look, I know that the only way to progress in my walk with the Lord, this is what Paul says, the only way I can keep progressing is to keep moving forward. Not just be okay with being okay where we are. And if we go back to the Old Testament, and we're going to go back to Exodus in the Old Testament, and we're going to look at a story, the people of Israel, all right? So, and we know the story. The people of Israel, when they were enslaved by Egypt and by Pharaoh, right? We know Moses was called to go deliver his people out of Egypt. He goes in, and it's a long process, right? There are 10 very terrible things that have to happen, in this process in order to get Pharaoh's attention, and all this stuff's going on. And finally, Pharaoh says, all right, you are free to go. You're free from your slavery. Just get out of here. So Moses takes the Israelite people and he starts leading them to where? Where are they eventually going? The promised land. This is a good thing, right? He's going to lead his people to the promised land. The thing promised of God. Land of milk and honey, the best they can even imagine. And then we go to Exodus chapter 14. And here it is. God's already delivered Israel. They're leaving Egypt. They're heading towards the promised land. And they aren't quite there yet. In fact, they're actually, if we know the story, they're still 40 years from being there. But they don't know that yet, okay? They think they're on their way and they'll be there immediately. So they're getting there, but they approach this obstacle, kind of gets in their way. Okay, the Red Sea now comes and it's there. And it's blocking their direction, blocking their goal, blocking their movement forward. And this is a problem. Because not only now is the Red Sea in front of them, but now Pharaoh's changed his mind, and him and his armies are coming from behind to come and recapture him. So they're in a very hard place. They're in a very scary place. We go to Exodus chapter 14, and we read some things that happened. Verse 10. It says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after him. They were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, here, this was the pattern of the Israelites, okay? Here they were delivered from all the slavery, and now a little bit of trouble happens, and what they start saying? To Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? What have you done by delivering us out of all that slavery for years and years and years? They started getting upset. And then they say, in verse 12, didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone. Let us just serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. It would have been better for us to be slaves than to die in the desert. Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm. You will see the deliverance that the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Listen to the Lord. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on." Here they are, okay? They've been delivered out of slavery. Decades and decades and decades of slavery to finally head to the promised land in freedom. They face their first obstacle and they start getting upset. Because now the enemy's behind. They can't go left. They can't go right. They can't go back. There's only one direction to go, and that's forward, and it's blocked by this sea, this Red Sea. They can't do it. And so what do? They began to cry to the Lord. Not just cry out. They're being crybabies. All right, that's what they're doing. They went to Moses and said, "You should have just left." They started whining. "We should have just stayed and died there. We're better off being slaves and dying in Egypt than dying out here in the desert. You know, there's no apparent way to go." And God says, "Stop your crying. Move forward." He says, "Why are you crying to me? Just move forward." But there's no apparent way to go, right? Here's this Red Sea. There's no boats. There's no bridge. Right? They couldn't swim across, and yet God's still saying, "Go forward." Even though they didn't see any way to go, He says, "Move forward." And when they finally did, Moses takes his staff, he stretches it over. What happens? The waters separate, and the Israelites walk across this Red Sea on dry land. Even though they never saw a way to go, there was no place to go, God said move forward, they finally decided to do that and follow Him, then things changed. Right? Go forward. And something amazing happened. They escaped. And then the unexpected happened. Right? Why? What? Because they moved forward. And it didn't just end there. Not only did they walk across, but of course the Egyptians following them all were wiped out when the waters collapsed on them and killed them all. He took care of both problems, the enemy from behind and the obstacle ahead, all because they decided to move forward. Guys, and I'm telling you, there's only one way to move in your relationship with God, and that's forward. If you want to be successful in your relationship with God, you got to move forward. And I'm saying it, even if it's small steps, be moving forward. Staying still will be devastating to you in your relationship. You'll become stagnant. And when we start to move forward, God will open the doors. See, sometimes it's just us walking by faith and not trusting that God's going to open the right way, open the path, clear the waters, whatever it's going to take. Only one way to move. Then we have a similar story, Joshua chapter 3. Okay? A similar story about this. Here's the Israelites again, a little bit later on, and they face another obstacle. This time instead of the Red Sea, it's the Jordan River. Right? And this is I love this story for a couple of reasons. But here they are, the children of Israel. They're at the brink of this water, the Jordan River. They can't cross. They have to keep moving. Right? If they don't move forward, they can't get to their final destination. And in Joshua chapter 3, this is what happens. Joshua 3 verse 14. Now remember how they got across the Red Sea. Here's Moses, their leader. He sticks the staff across, the water's clear. God decides He's going to expect something different from them this time. Verse 14 of Joshua 3, it says, "So when the people then broke camp to cross the Jordan," right? They knew they could cross the Jordan, that they had to cross the Jordan, right? So here's who's leading. The priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now, in previous verses, God has given some direction of what's to happen for them to cross. All right? So, here we go, verse 15. "Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during the harvest." So not only is there this huge river to cross, now it's at flood stage. So it's even wider, running faster, even more dangerous to try to cross. All right? So here it is. It says that as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the sea of the Arabith, that's the Dead Sea, was completely cut off, so the people crossed over opposite of Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. I look at this story, and whenever I got to speak at a youth camp years ago, I would always try to end my messages for the week with this story. Because this is the challenge. We come to church, we hear some things, we hear some good messages, we get blessed by the worship, we sing, we get blessed by giving to the offering, we hear Sunday school, we get all these things that are going good, and then we leave and we don't do anything different in our lives. Sometimes it's because we're scared. We're nervous to make a change because, again, we like comfort, right? We don't want to do that. And then God just challenges us sometimes. He says, look, take what you've learned, take what you've done, and even though you may not have it all figured out, even though you may not be able to see the end destination, maybe there's a lot of obstacles in your way, he says, just step out in faith. These priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, they were told, here's the deal. Once you get to the river, don't just stop. The water's still going to be there. Don't just stop. He says, actually step into the water. Okay, step into the water. And so here's these guys are leading. They're carrying the Ark of the Covenant. God right there with them. And they've been told to do something that they don't understand. Step out in faith. He says, don't wait for anything to happen. Remember, back when Moses helped them with the sea, he stretched it out. It was dry before they ever stepped in. Now he's saying step in even though there's still water. So they stepped in. And it says that as soon as they got their feet in it. I don't know if it was just their feet, if it was to their knees, I don't know how high they had to get before the water actually separated, but all I know is they had to actually step in. And once they stepped into the water, that's when the water parted. That is, do that in faith first. They couldn't just wait on somebody to separate it for them. They couldn't just wait on God to do it and then walk out because they could see it. No, they had to walk even into the obstacle, knowing that they had to trust God. And look, God continuously in Israelites' lives, and I think sometimes in our lives, allows obstacles to come in before us. And they allow distractions sometimes to come in order to get us to trust in Him more and more and more. And there are some things, guys, I know that we're never going to accomplish on our own. There are some things you just cannot accomplish on your own. You have to have the ways of God. You have to have the power of God to get the victory. And God demands obedience from us. Obedience to move forward. We're going to have to expect obstacles. This is going to happen. We're going to have obstacles come up in our lives. Just expect them. Expect some resistance. When you're trying to be a witness to a friend, a family member, whatever it is, you're going to get some resistance at times. They're going to look at you and be tired of what you're trying to share with them. And be fed up with all the times you've been trying to give them the gospel of Christ. You've got to keep moving forward. We can't turn back. I think God's word is pretty simple. Move forward. And that victory is going to come. It may come immediately. It may come in a day. It may come in a week. It may come in a month. It may come in a year. And the idea is you got to keep moving forward, though. Maybe you'll get that letter right at the right time. You'll get that phone call at the right time. But the victory will come if we just keep moving forward. If you give up, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get that victory. I think sometimes God delays His answers just to see sometimes how committed we are to following Him. You know, and I've said this before when we talk about prayer. I believe there's only 3 answers to prayer. God says yes, He says no, or He says wait. Be patient, and I'll give you your answer. But you got to keep moving forward. And the time between the promise that the promise is given, and sometimes the time between that and when it's fulfilled seems like a wilderness experience, kind of like the Israelites walking in the wilderness. Sometimes it seems like it's forever. But guess what? Eventually, there's only one way to survive in the wilderness, to keep moving forward. See, the Israelites, again, they took 40 years to move from Egypt to the Promised Land. Some of that, and that's because of their own mistakes, right? Their own decisions to follow anyone but God at certain times. But if they would have just camped out and stayed right there on the other side of the Red Sea and never moved any place from that, they would have never got to the Promised Land. They would have never gotten to where God had promised them that they could be. No, they had to keep moving, even when they didn't understand what was going on. Keep walking in the direction of whatever the last word God told you to move. If God said, you keep moving in this direction, you just keep moving in that direction until He tells you to move somewhere else. There's a really interesting story in 2 Kings chapter 7. And what we're going to see in this story is there's the land of Samaria, okay, some God's people in the land of Samaria, and they're being besieged by the army of the Arameans. Their city's being besieged. They've been circled. They've been cut off from all resources, and they're desperate. They're out of food. They're out of water. They have no help coming from anybody else. They know they're about to die. That's their destiny. We're either going to be killed or be put back into slavery with the Armenians, right? This is what's happening. Their city is surrounded. There's no hope for them. And we get to the story about 4 lepers. 4 guys that no one wants to have anything to do with. 4 guys who have a disease that is not only destined to kill them, but it'll kill anybody that they come in contact with, right? These 4 guys are on their own. We come to 2 Kings chapter 7. And here's this story. So we know the background. The city's surrounded. There's no hope for anybody. This Armenian army is about to take over and wipe them out. And here's these 4 lepers in verse 3. It says, there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. So they're sitting at the city gate, knowing they can't go out, knowing they can't go in. And they said to each other, why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, well, the famine is there, right? All the food is cut off, water is cut off. The famine is there and we'll die. If we stay here, we'll die. So, let's go over to the enemy, the camp of the Armenians, the enemy's camp, and we'll just surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, we're going to die anyway, right? So this is their options. Stay here and die, go in and die, go over there and probably die. That's their options, okay? But they know that moving forward, moving from where they are, at least gives them a chance. So verse 5 says, at dusk they got up and they went to the camp of the Armenians. And when they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. This is why. It says, for the Lord had caused the Armenians to hear the sounds of chariots and horses and a great army. So that they said to one another, look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittites and the Egyptians, kings, to attack us. So they got up and they fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and their donkeys. They left the camp as it was and they ran for their lives. So these 4 men, 4 guys with leprosy, says the men who had leprosy, they reached the edge of the camp. They entered one of the tents and they ate and they drank. Then they took the silver, the gold, and the clothes, and they went off and they hid them. Then they returned and they entered another tent, took some things from it, and they hid them also. Look, these 4 guys who had no chance of survival, right? They could stay right where they were and die. They had no food, they had no water, they had nothing. They could go back into town where there's also no food, no water, and they could die there. Or they could move from where they were. They couldn't change their sickness. They couldn't change that situation in their lives. But they knew they could do something else. They could change their location. Let's just move out of here, move forward, and just see what happens. And what happened? Everything changed. Not just for them, but for the people of Samaria. Everything changed. They found food. They found wealth. They found all the things they were never going to get by sitting still and doing nothing. They had to move. They had a desire to live. They had a desire to be more than they were. So they moved. They moved forward. Guys, when I look at us, I think our success in life, our success, not just in all areas of life, but especially spiritually, involves us moving forward, moving from where we are. As a church, we got to keep moving forward. As individuals, we got to keep moving forward. And there are 3 things, and if you're going to take notes, these are 3 things I want you to write down, okay? There are 3 things I want you to remember about this to take home with you today. Because there are things I think we should move from, okay? I think it's time for us to move from certain things. All right? And this is it. First one is this. I think it's time for us to move from from religion to relationship. So many of us, and some of this it's us living in the United States, and it's that religion, that Christianity. It's easy just to have religion. It's easy just to say, I'll read my Bible, I'll go to church, I'll say the prayers, I'll do the things I have to do in order to look like I'm spiritual, and I'll just go through the routine, right? Go through the motions. That's religion. That's not what God intends for us. He wants a relationship with us. There's a huge difference between religion and a relationship. Now, will a relationship involve religion? Yeah, it can. It will. It'll involve those Bible studies and those readings and those. That's all important to that. But if you're just doing those and you don't have the relationship, all that's worthless. It's time to move from just worrying about religion and actually moving into this relationship. There's a huge difference in all those things. We understand what it means to be in a relationship with someone. Karen and I have been married 25 years now, as of a week or so ago. All right? And I guarantee you, my relationship with her is just that. It's a relationship. We have time. We have communication. We talk to one another. We share with one another. We disagree with one another. We have all this. It's all about this having this relationship. If we were just married on paper and we never talked and we never visited with one another, nobody would look at me and think, oh, that's such a good relationship they have, right? No, they say, what is going on there? There's something wrong with them. And yet so many of us in our religion, our relationship with God, that's exactly how it is. We come, we do nothing, we say nothing, we don't interact with God. We just kind of go through the motions. That's religion. It's not a relationship. It's time to move from that. Second thing is, I think it's time to move from obligation to dedication. See, a lot of times, then, even once you've gotten into a relationship, then you start looking at it as, now I'm obligated to do this. I got to go to church on Sunday morning because that's what, somewhere in the Bible it says, thou shalt go to church on every Sunday morning, I'm sure, right? So it's an obligation. They need somebody to teach in the Sunday school. Fine, I'll go teach because somebody's got to do it. Or and we start looking at things as an obligation. This is a job. This is something. Guys, that is not where we need to be. We got to move from obligation to being dedicated. I want to do this because I'm dedicated to God. I'm dedicated to Him leading in my life. I'm dedicated to Him I'm dedicated to serve Him and to love others and to do the things that He has asked of me to do in Scripture. There's a big difference, again, between obligation and doing things because you're dedicated. And the third thing is, I think it's time to move then from membership to ministry. Okay? A lot of people think just going to the church, being a member, being an active attender, being there every week, being every time the doors are open, we're a membership of a club. Right? That's what it is. And I really think we got to move from that just being the important thing to us wanting to be a minister in our lives, every day in our lives. Because it's not just coming in on Sunday morning and doing whatever you need to do because you're a member. No, because if you have a relationship with God, you're dedicated to God. Guess what? Every day you're doing ministry. Every day you walk in to a restaurant and you sit down and you get to visit and be nice and cordial to whoever's waiting on you, you get to represent Jesus Christ. That's a ministry. Every time you talk to a family member that may or may not be in a relationship with Christ, you can just say, this is what let me tell you what God did in my life this last week. You get a chance to be a minister, talking to your neighbors, whatever it is. We can be ministers all day, every day, if we just look at our lives as ministry, not just a membership in some club. But our goal is to be a minister all these times. If we can move in these directions, guys, in our lives, we're not going to ever get still and be stagnant. We're going to keep moving. There's a story told that several years ago, in the course of a conversation at a dinner party, Albert Einstein was having a conversation with his young neighbor. And this young neighbor asked this white-haired scientist, she said this, what are you actually by profession? She asked him. And this is what Albert Einstein said. He said, I devote myself to the study of physics. This girl, who had been in school herself, looked at him in astonishment and said, you mean to say that you study physics at your age? She exclaimed. Then she said, I finished my studies a year ago. Right? She figured since she was done with school, she was done with studying. She had it all figured out. Where Albert Einstein said, no, I'm learning every day new things about physics. I'm continually studying. Guys, we're not through with our relationship with Jesus Christ. Just because you accept Him into your life, it didn't just stop there, right? Just because you come to church on a Sunday morning, hey, I got it figured out, you go home. No, it doesn't stop. No matter your age, no matter your position in life, we're not through. We have to continue to move. There can never be a time or a place in our lives that we stop moving forward. That's the challenge I'm going to give you this morning. We've got to keep moving forward. So, do me a favor. If you would bow your head and close your eyes. And let me just ask a couple questions. First, I did talk a little bit about relationships.